Princess.
The Reverend Mother Guy Salim is here. She wants to know about your dreams. Leave us.
You dismissed my mother in her own house.
Come here. Kneel. Put your right hand in the box. I hold at your neck the Gom Jabbar.
What's in the box?
Pain. Your mother stands behind that door. No one will get past her. An animal caught in a trap will gnaw off its own leg to escape. What will you do? I must not fear. If you had been unable to control your impulses like an animal, we could not let you live. You inherit too much power.
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained, and as requested, today we'll be exploring the Bene Gesserit as featured in Frank Herberts' expansive Dune universe. The Bene Gesserit Order, also known as the Sisterhood, were an ancient and adept organization consisting of all-women spies, nuns, scientists, and theologians that used genetic experimentation, galactic political interference, and religious engineering to further their agenda. Hoping to guide the human race with the advent of their chosen one, the Kwisatz Haderach, their actions had a major impact on the evolution of humanity. In this video, I'm going to do my best to explain their origins, history, philosophy, training, hierarchy, and of course, their incredible powers and abilities.
Leave us. You must do everything my Reverend Mother tells you.
You dismissed my mother in her own house.
Come here. Kneel.
In the Legends of Dune prequel trilogy by Brian Herbert and Kevin Anderson, it is revealed that the sorceresses of Rorschach were the ancestors of the Bene Gesserit. Possessing destructive telekinetic powers that now only existed in their women, they too had a breeding plan to create more powerful telepaths. When humanity is endangered by a widespread plague called the Demon Scourge deployed by the thinking machines, they expanded their genetic program to preserve human bloodlines. Raquel, Berto, and Nurul became their leader after surviving a poison attempt, becoming the first to internally render the toxin harmless. The ordeal made Raquel the first to access other memory, the combined ego and memories of all her female ancestors, and use the power of voice. I should note the term ego is used in the psychoanalytical sense. It refers to the part of the mind that mediates between the conscious and the unconscious, and is responsible for the reality testing and a sense of personal identity. With these combined powers, Raquel established the Bene Gesserit, who began instituting a comparable poisoning ritual called the spice agony to unlock the same abilities in others. Arising in the political turmoil that followed the Butlerian Jihad, they quickly established themselves as an influential political force. In Frank Herbert's Dune universe, they are described as a secretive matriarchal order that achieved superhuman abilities through physical and mental conditioning. Under the guise of humbly serving the Empire, the Sisterhood is in fact a major power in the universe, using influence to subtly guide humanity along their plans for the future. Beyond the outer virtues of poise, self-control, theology, and diplomacy, the Bene Gesserit training gave them complete mastery over their bodies, while the Bene Gesserit power of voice allowed them to control others by merely modulating their vocal tones. It's important to note that every member of the Bene Gesserit was conditioned into singular loyalty to the Order and its goals, with allegiances to even family being secondary, and no goal was more important than the Sisterhood's large-scale breeding program. The millennia-spanning endeavor aimed to create a super being that could tap into abilities even the Bene Gesserit could not, a being they hoped would give them more direct control over the universe. To this end, the Bene Gesserit manipulated bloodlines using breeding sisters to collect the genes they required to create the Kwisatz Haderach.
If you had been unable to control your impulses, we could not let you live. You inherit too much power.
What, because I'm a Duke's son?
Because you are Jessica's son. You have more than one birthright, boy.
The essence of the Bene Gesserit training philosophy was that if one could control oneself, or know thyself, ultimately, one could control the universe. Its first axiom was, "My mind controls my reality." The training itself was based on a series of progressive exercises lasting approximately 10 years, which gave the student absolute power to control her body and mind, and to even control others. The intent was not to withdraw to an internal fantasy world, but to observe and understand reality with detached objectivity. Two precepts in Bene Gesserit training highlighted their philosophy. The first showed the necessity of discipline. To use raw powers to make yourself infinitely vulnerable to greater powers, and the second dealt with the practical application of the training. The mind can go in either direction under stress, toward positive or negative, Think of it as a spectrum whose extremes are unconsciousness at the negative end and hyperconsciousness at the positive end. Therefore, the goal was to ensure the initiate had her power under control at all times. However, there was a fatal weakness inherent in this training. Great control could lead to great confidence, to overconfidence, and finally, to an absolute loss of objectivity, to vanity and pride. Candidates were therefore continually evaluated and given exercises designed to prevent this from happening. For example, the third-year training section opened with this caution: all proof inevitably leads to propositions which have no proof. All things are known because we want to believe in them. One important omission from all of the training was ethical or moral philosophy. For the Bene Gesserit, in the Missionara Protectiva material, religion was described as a purposeful instruction of the masses, implying it was something they would use, not something they wanted used against them. Herbert noted that over 10,000 years before the events of Dune, in the chaotic time after the Butlerian Jihad, the Bene Gesserit consolidated their hold upon the sorceresses, explored subtle narcotics, developed Prana-bindu training, and conceived the Missionara Protectiva, that black arm of superstition. But it is also the period that saw the composing of the litany against fear and the assembly of the Azar book, that bibliographic marvel that preserves the great secrets of the most ancient faiths. It's safe to say that they studied theology, and the text described thousands of religio-mythic variations on the theme of a superpower, but there was no evidence that the Bene Gesserit actually believed in any higher being other than their Kwisatz Haderach, who was technically more of a mascot that they've been engineering than a deity to them.
And how can this be? For he is the Kwisatz Haderach!
The Bene Gesserit training was a two-part program that would be pursued simultaneously by a candidate, involving the conditioning of the mind and body. A child spent hours learning the many languages used in her culture, and then spent hours sitting absolutely still, lowering her body temperature or slowing her heartbeat, moving one muscle at a time as she catalogued the stimulus response pattern of her body. The physical training program, the Prana-bindu school, was perhaps the best way to illustrate the unification of these two primary branches of training. The basic premise of the training was found in an ancient Terran religion, in which the path of the truth was called Subda, and closely resembled what is known to the Bene Gesserit as the Way. Subda allowed an internal realization of truth, which identified the knower with an immutable reality. The Bene Gesserit Way also identified the knower with reality, but denied immutability, thus the Bene Gesserit axiom: the purpose of argument is to change the nature of truth. The same conditioning processes, however, were used to attain both Subda and the Way. The key to both was achieving harmony and tranquility through establishing balance within the individual. This balance was achieved through tepes, austere regiments which controlled and organized the psychic and physical forces of the body and concentrated one's power, and upsana, the meditation which allowed one to go deep within oneself to find the link between the internal forces, the point of balance between knowing the body and knowing the mind. The mental self, on the other hand, was trained through Jnana, a discipline that controlled reasoning. Jnana paired linguistics and logic, enabling the individual to distinguish between language and meaning. The student was constantly taught that a sentence meant more than the meaning of the individual words, and that it included the physical activity which accompanied the act of speaking. The observer therefore had to be able to read and register the manner of the speaker, understand the linguistic patterns of thought conveyed through the immediate language, and synthesize all these channels instantly in order to determine what was really being said. Thus, in the process of learning, the student had to completely control the internal sources, her own physical, mental, and emotional condition at the time of synthesis, and then totally perceive the external sources, the environment of the speaker, the physical and psychic disposition of the speaker, the cultural undertones of the language, and the actual overtones of the word sets being used. The aim was to replace thinking machines with people, who were not only capable of instant logic computation like machines, but who were also able to assimilate sensory and emotional information. Through a rational and intuitive process, the student would come to conclusions that were human rather than mechanistic, but objectively detached rather than egotistically biased. Not only was Prana-bindu a state of concentration that was essential to the observational skills and martial art techniques of the Bene Gesserit, but they believed it was needed to understand the reality of a situation. To gain the proper attitude for complete concentration, one had to first remove oneself, mentally, if not physically, from all distractions. To do this, one used relaxation techniques that eliminated extraneous stimuli. The student also learned how to distinguish primary information from secondary or unessential information, to see the facts and discard the ghafla. In this state of observation, one assimilated pertinent data from the present situation and recalled all pertinent data from memory without error. The observer then assumed a positive physical posture of relaxation and concentration. Next, they began controlling breathing, providing sufficient oxygen supply to support accelerated mental activity. Finally, as a last step before entering the concentration mode, one withdrew sensory and emotional awareness from all internal areas of distraction. In most cases, they performed a simple calmness ritual, but in great danger, they recited the litany against fear to subdue any instinctual and primal terror. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me, and when it is gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear is gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. At this point, the observer could begin 3 stages of analysis. First, they had to severely limit the attention to only the past and present data concerning the topic. Second, they entered a state of total contemplation, in which the attention flowed in a steady stream over the topic. Third, one had to be conscious not of the techniques of observation, not of the presence of self, but of the topic. One had to become the topic. At the moment of unity, the observer understood the topic as she understood herself. Thus, all knowledge is dependent on the observation of detail, and on one's body being trained to support close observation, on objective classification and cataloguing, and on maximum retention of data. Only complete control of nerves and tissues, muscles, blood and chemistry detached them enough from the demands of the self that they could have objective separation during the observation, analysis, and formulation process. The control of the body led to the purification of the mind that was vital in separating the real from the unreal. While it took a woman 10 years of training to reach this level, she could then perform the entire function in less than a second when required. One of the controls learned is the ability to release oneself from the artificial confines of the human notion of time. There was no time in the concentration mode, and all activities could be managed simultaneously. Once the basic processes had been mastered, second-level functional states could be invoked, such as Tao, Prajna, and Adept. Tao was a dormancy trance, a type of bindu suspension, in which they could slow their physiological activities to a level just on the edge of death. The trance was extremely useful for survival under threatening conditions and stimulated the rejuvenation of cells. With it, a sister was able to heal wounds while simultaneously tempering their need for water or food. In fact, the Bene Gesserit knew their cellular structure so intimately that it's even hinted they could technically slow their aging process dramatically by controlling every aspect of their metabolism. The Prajna meditation trance, on the other hand, was used for deep understanding and for the special state of seeing, usually augmented with chemicals like the spice melange. This enabled them to exercise minute perception at all times. Combined with their analytical abilities, they're capable of divining secrets in people and circumstances that are invisible to everyone else, while the Adept mental state was a retrieval process accessible to all skilled Bene Gesserits. Also called the demanding memory, it was different from the consciousness impression complete recall method often used to store and process data. The normal mnemonic process allowed complete reproduction of any conversation, but Adept not only stored material in the subconscious, it also used the subconscious to integrate new information, adding detail to the logically assimilated memory. Just as the Prana-bindu grants the Bene Gesserit control over each muscle and nerve, they also have complete conscious control over the functions of their internal organs and body chemistry. The Bene Gesserit are therefore immune to poisons, as they can simply change the chemical makeup of any harmful substance in their body to render it harmless. One of their most significant biological abilities is their power to control, at conception, whether their child would be a boy or a girl. Another mind-boggling power is their concept of simul flow, essentially the ability to master the simultaneous flow of several threads of consciousness at any given time. The combination of simul flow, their analytical abilities, and other memory grants the Bene Gesserit intelligence that is almost beyond comprehension. After years of Prana-bindu training, they would then begin learning the infamous Bene Gesserit martial arts called the Wielding Way. With supreme muscle control, the hand-to-hand combat technique enabled them to generate astonishing force and speed. To the opponent and any bystanders, the movement seemed almost like teleportation. Only Imperial Sardaukar and the Fremen of Arrakis compared to the combat techniques, attack speed, and resourcefulness of the Bene Gesserit. Of course, it would then become an important element of the Fremen hand-to-hand combat during the Muad'Dib's Jihad. The Bene Gesserit are also notable for their extensive skill in seduction, sex, and sexual imprinting. The most talented and highly trained are known as imprinters and target men in a position of power or future power, or those with specific qualities that the Order wishes to incorporate into their breeding program. Men seduced by an imprinter are permanently affected and are therefore consciously or subconsciously favorable to the Sisterhood. The training program had a second objective, to control other individuals, masses, and even the culture. The Bene Gesserit were taught to read and register a person in order to manipulate them by the voice, a subtle manipulation of vocal tones.
Stop! The rope! Give me the knife!
In reading, one observed and identified the clue tones that would control the other person, while in registering, they used a brief mnemonic trance to retain the clue tones, making that person controllable in future situations. Through the voice, a Bene Gesserit could then manipulate individuals or large groups who were forced to obey simple instructions. During her final 3 years of education, a candidate began theoretical courses on history, politics, anthropology, to theology, among other topics. For those who entered the Missionara Protectiva, however, they were inducted into a special program that taught the practical manipulation of galactic politics and culture through mythos implantation.
He wields our power. He had to be tested to the limits. So much potential wasted in a male. You were told to bear only daughters.
Women unquestionably ruled the Bene Gesserit, and while men did maintain some important roles, they all had to answer to the most powerful of them, the Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother Superior. The Reverend Mother Superior maintained ultimate control over the entire order, and invoked unquestioned loyalty among the subordinate Reverend Mothers. One of the powers of a Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother Superior is her other memory, the combined ego and memories of all her female ancestors, passed on through genetic memory. But it should be noted, the Reverend Mother only has access to her female lineage. Her male line is unavailable to her, present only as a dark, terrifying void. This is why the purpose of the Bene Gesserit breeding program was to create a Kwisatz Haderach, a male with other memory who could see both lines, male and female.
Enough.
Below the Reverend Mother Superior, they had the Kwisatz Mother, who was solely in charge of the program to breed the Kwisatz Haderach. They then had the Reverend Mothers, who filled the role of advisors, faculty, historians, geneticists, spies, in addition to being the general authority of the order. Proctor Superiors are in charge of a chapter house, which is the secret headquarters that function as a temporary planetary base. Below them are truthsayers, who perfected the art of sensing if an individual was telling a lie by observing subtle changes in respiration, eye movement, facial motions, and body language. Then we have the Bene Gesserit sisters, who include agents, concubines, and potential wives, before we finally get initiates, students in training that have a very difficult road ahead, but one that will grant them supreme power.
His sight is barely awakened, and now he goes into the fire. But our plans are measured in centuries. We have other prospects, if he fails his promise.
For millennia, the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood chose to exercise its power by acting in the background of imperial politics. Through their breeding program, their placement of agents in the imperial court in great houses, and their provision of services, the Bene Gesserit carved out a significant niche in the structure of the Imperium. They were also silent partners in Coum, a major galactic organization that had a gigantic monopoly in all forms of commerce across the Imperium, along with the Bene Gesserit, a secretive guild of genetic manipulators. The ultimate plan of guiding humanity was supposed to occur when the daughter of Leto Atreides I bred with Phaedra Harkonnen. However, this was undone by Jessica when she consciously gave Leto a son, Paul, instead of a daughter. Paul was assumed to be the Kwisatz Haderach, but the Bene Gesserit believed he arrived a generation too soon. Their goal was further disrupted when Paul had a child with Chani, the Fremen daughter of Liet Kynes, stirring up rogue and unpredictable genetic traits. Their son, Leto Atreides II, and his actions as the God Emperor radically altered the long-term destiny of the Bene Gesserit. Following his death, there came into existence a power vacuum, one that would be filled by both the Bene Gesserit and the Bene Gesserit, who sought to maintain control over remnants of the Empire after humanity exploded across the universe in the Scattering. Their primary goal became the re-establishment of their power base, a goal threatened by the emergence of the Honored Martyrs, a bastardization of the Bene Gesserit and Fish Speakers that returned from the Scattering. It's here that the Bene Gesserit came to believe that the only way to avoid another tyrant was for them to take a more active role in politics and universal events. This led to an open conflict between the Bene Gesserit, the Bene Gesserit, and the Honored Martyrs, one that transformed the Sisterhood into champions of the Old Order when the Honored Martyrs began attacking planets of the Imperium. During the war between the two sisterhoods, the Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother Superior, Dawi Odrade, who was a descendant of Paul, realized that only through combining the sisterhood with the Martyrs could both organizations survive into the future. And so Odrade trained a captured Martyr named Mabella in the ways of the sisters. Just as she hoped, when the Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother Superior was killed in the ensuing battle, Mabella avenged her by killing the leader of the Honored Martyrs, Lono. Taking the role of both fallen leaders, Mabella would unite both groups into the new Sisterhood. Through their unity and combined purpose, the Order continued to attain power and influence, and never to direct humanity along a path of insight and stability, despite a few mistakes along the way. After all, even with superhumans, great control leads to great confidence, to overconfidence, and finally, to an ultimate loss of objectivity, to vanity and pride. With that said, that's all for today, folks. A huge thanks to everyone that requested we explore the Bene Gesserit. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to stay up to date on all my content, and if there's anything else you'd like to request, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.
Mug, you dogs.